Well, I'm sure we're going to still get some people trickling in, but I think we can probably get started. It's 1 o'clock.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Beth Brown. I'm the CEO of Community Foundation Sonoma County, and thank you so much for joining us today. And even more so, thank you for all the work that you're doing in this just unimaginably challenging time. I heard, I'm getting a little feedback there. Caitlin, should I keep going?
Yeah, I think it's fixed now. Sorry.
Okay. I heard someone this morning describe the time we're in as a quarantine within a quarantine, related to COVID and the fires, and that sounds about right from the challenges that we're facing. And if we were together in a room, in an actual room, or even if we were in a smaller Zoom, one thing that I would ask all of you to share is something that you're feeling hopeful about, either personally or related to your organization or related to your community. And I know hope can be a hard, can seem a little aspirational right now, but I was thinking in the context of fundraising, that when you're doing fundraising, you're really at the intersection of need and hope. And sometimes in better times, it's actually the job of the fundraiser to be really pointing out and bringing awareness to the need. We're in a time right now where there is a almost universal sense of a variety of the needs. So perhaps it's our job to work a little bit more on that muscle of hope. And I have a quote that I'm going to read by a woman named Rebecca Solnit, who wrote a book called Hope in the Dark, which was published in 2004 at a time that seemed very dark about the new millennium, which when you put it into perspective doesn't seem as challenging as now. But let me read this. She's a historian, especially around social justice movements. Hope locates itself in the premises that we don't know what will happen, and that in the spaciousness of uncertainty gives us room to act. When you recognize uncertainty, you recognize that you may be able to influence the outcomes, you alone or you in concert with a few dozen or several million others. So I just raised that as encouragement to all of us, including advice to myself, to try to continue to not just find hope, but to spread that to our teams and to donors. And if we can have a role in making hope as contagious as other viruses, I think it'll serve us well during this time. So with that, we'll move forward onto our program. I'm going to be joined by a number of my colleagues, and I'll go ahead and introduce two of them to you. First, Karin Demarest, who's our Vice President for Community Impact. I think many of you know Karin has been at the foundation for almost 9 years, I believe. And I'd also like to introduce our newest colleague, Kris Van Giesen. So Kris just joined us. I think we're coming up on the week 3 anniversary. Kris joins us as Senior Vice President and leads our philanthropic planning team. Kris has a career of experience in fundraising, most recently at Outward Bound, and prior to that at Hannah Boyce Center, and perhaps some of you knew him in that capacity. So Kris, we didn't give you much of a honeymoon. We're just throwing you right in. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Beth, and thanks for that great message about hope, especially during these times. That's really needed. As Beth said, I'm a Sonoma County native. Our family's been in Sonoma County since 1967. Was raised here, proud graduate of Santa Rosa High School. My parents and 3 siblings and I were very involved growing up in many aspects of our community for over 50 years now. And when I first spoke to Beth about this opportunity, it truly felt like a dream job to me, working not only with the wonderful people of Sonoma County, but also really where my heart is on dealing with some of the amazing and really challenging issues that we're all facing right now as a community. As Beth said, I spent about 11 years working at the Hannah Boyce Center in Sonoma Valley. I met a handful of you that are on this call right now there, and I really look forward not only to working with Sonoma Valley, but obviously well beyond that into Santa Rosa and south to Petaluma, north up into Cloverdale, and over on the west side up the coast as well. It's a as I said, a time where we have many needs, and I'm excited to roll my sleeves up and get going. Only been on the job a few weeks, but I'm really lucky to have a great team, two of whom are going to speak here in just a minute. But before they speak, I wanted to make sure, I think Caitlin said we have a few little rules that we wanted to follow, and kind of those who want to ask questions. After the sessions are over, Elly and Kristin, who are speaking first, and then our fundraising experts from the CTE Foundation, 10,000 Degrees, and La Luz, where we will have time for Q&A. And to ask questions, use the Q&A feature that is at the bottom of your screen, not the chat, but the Q&A. And if someone else asks a question and you really like to know the answer to that as well, you can upvote the question by clicking the thumbs up icon. So again, the Q&A, type in your questions, and if you like something, elevate it so that we make sure we address it. And obviously, if it's specifically for one person, address it to them, and note that in where you type. And we'll also be looking at hands from our panelists if they want to answer a question. Karin will be calling on them. Really quickly then, but very importantly, our first two members are key folks on this team at the Community Foundation, and they're going to speak here each for a few minutes, and then we'll move on with the other panelists. First is Kristin Nelson, who is describes herself as a generalist, nonprofit professional, running programs and development teams and special initiatives at one of the big 5 California foundations before. Kind of 20 years of experience into a neat bundle is the way that she describes it. And she's lived in Sonoma County for 9 years after a long stint in the city. And a lot of people know her since she's been here for almost a decade. And the other speaker is Elly Grogan, who's our senior philanthropy officer, been with the foundation for 6 years now. She's a philanthropic advisor to major donors of the foundation, and she helps manage our planned giving program as well. And she previously served as a program officer with the community impact team and backgrounds in international development and environmental education. So with that, we'll go to Elly and Kristin, and thank you all very much. And I look forward to working with all of you in the county in the coming months. Take it away.
Thank you, Kris. We're so grateful that you've joined our team, and so pleased that we get to call you a colleague now. It's very exciting. But I just also wanted to take a moment to say how grateful we are to all of the nonprofit leaders who are here today. We continue to be absolutely in awe of the work that you're doing, especially as that work becomes more and more complicated in the environment that we're in now. And we're just profoundly grateful of everything that you do to support our community. So thank you. I know we can't be together in a room. I wish we could, but we're just so pleased and grateful to be in partnership with you. Many of you have attended quarterly coffees with Karin or other workshops that our community impact team has led over the years. And I know that you're familiar with how they work, but I wanted to make sure that you were also aware of how the philanthropic planning team works. So we're going to start today by just giving you an overview of our philanthropic advising services so that it can give you some context of how we work with donors during these crises that we're in right now. As I know it is for you as well, working with donors and some of Sonoma County's most generous and thoughtful folks is just a profound honor. As philanthropic advisors, we really help donors to articulate their values and their philanthropic goals, and then to actualize those goals by creating giving plans and philanthropic budgets, by helping them to learn deeply about the community needs and the issues that are most important to them, and then helping them to build partnership with community leaders and many, many more things along the way that we help them do. The philanthropic advising and planning team at the Community Foundation works in tandem with our colleagues here at the Community Impact team, who are those folks that get to steward donors' legacy gifts and to make grants through our grant-making program. But we also work with nonprofit leaders to understand how we can best support and amplify your work when it aligns with our donors' goals and interests. So with that in mind, a couple of years ago, we began the process of assessing our donor services model. And that was really to help determine how we could best serve our donors, our shared donors. We know that when we can do that really well, that we have a better chance of positively impacting our nonprofit community through philanthropic services and resources. So as a result, we really stepped back and revamped our whole service model to provide those more robust services to donors who specifically have the capacity to be more impactful. So really what we want to do is we want to leverage their generosity and their philanthropy to get those resources out the door for the whole betterment of the community. So to do that, we stepped back and we segmented our donors into two categories, an Elevate category and an Essential category. Elevate donors are donors who have been assigned a philanthropic advisor like Elly and myself. You can tell I'm gesturing to the side of the screen where she is. So they have access not just to an advisor, a point of contact that's really kind of their partnership in philanthropy, but we also provide access to more strategic and bespoke services to them. So these donors we're able to provide this customized and deeper level of support to be able, because they're able to make larger grants into the nonprofit community. This work may be providing those multi-generational family and succession planning. It might be really diving and involving a lot more specific research. It could be long-term gift and grant planning or a myriad of other services that we provide to our Elevate donors. Our Essential donors work with our donor services coordinator at the Community Foundation, one of our colleagues who's not on the call today. But she is able to help them through all of their transactional grant making that they might be making from their donor advised funds. We also provide a bunch of online services for those donors as well, including sharing some opportunities that they might be able to fund. Philanthropic advisors are really lucky because we're able to kind of slow down the process and the understanding and the conversations that we have with these set of donors, because we really want to take the time to understand a donor's philanthropic goals. So when we are able to do that and we hear about funding opportunities from you, from nonprofits, that align with those donors' interests and goals, and this is the caveat, when all of it comes together and a donor has expressed to us that they are interested in hearing some about these new opportunities and things, then we have an opportunity then to share those ideas back to those donors. So it's when everything comes together, we have a chance to do that. I'm leaving you with this thought because we're going to go deeper into it when we come back. And I wanted to just give you a little teaser to keep you interested. But for right now, Elly is going to give you a little bit more of an overview of what the Community Foundation is doing right now in response to COVID and the fires. Elly?
Always have to remember to unmute. Hi, everybody, and thank you, Kristin. So I wanted to just briefly give you an update about how we're responding right now, and also talk about what we're seeing in terms of donor interest, their questions, and what they've been funding since March. So as many of you know, the focus of the foundation these past couple of years has really been on recovery from the 2017 fires, when we opened the Resilience Fund, which we intentionally did not name a fire relief fund, and thank goodness we didn't, because unfortunately we've had a number of disasters subsequently, and so we've remained really active in supporting the recovery efforts from Kincade Fire, and now from COVID and the Walbridge Fire. What we're specifically doing around COVID is partnering with the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, which is the largest community foundation in the country, who created a regional fund for the Bay Area to respond to COVID. And through that partnership, we have funds available to address the short-term needs around COVID through the competitive grant program that I'm sure many of you have applied for that just closed last week. And outside of that partnership, we're continuing to fundraise because we have seen historically, and that continues now, that many of the donors who are giving to the Resilience Fund are outside of Sonoma County, people who really love this community, who've visited, who have relatives here, and have a real soft spot for this community. And so we are continuing to see interest especially from corporations and foundations in this most recent, with the Walbridge fire and with COVID. Organizations who want to make one gift to support Sonoma County, knowing and trusting that a variety of nonprofits are going to be supported with that gift. So we remain really active with our fundraising, and that will continue. Since the pandemic, we've given out over $4 million in grants specifically for COVID. And we've seen that donors have been really, really engaged in wanting to support Sonoma County. We've seen that giving is up from donor advised funds over 57% over last year. And we already had an annual payout rate of around 23%. So, donors are they're digging deep right now, and they really want to find the best way to be there for you guys and to be there for the people who are really being impacted. The main interest area, and this is probably not surprising, has been around emergency food. So we've seen support for the larger organizations like Redwood Empire Food Bank, to smaller regional food pantries, and to programs that provide prepared meals. There's also been an interest in financial assistance to individuals, support for healthcare, and for organizations that are working with people who are experiencing homelessness. Initially, donors really wanted to understand the landscape around, the kind of broader landscape around COVID, and who was responding and what was happening. And that, mirrored some of those investments around emergency food. That was what we were seeing in the news. That was really front and center and really clear as people were losing their jobs. But as time has gone on and we're starting to see the, disproportionate impacts on certain groups within our community, we're seeing more inquiries from donors around those specific issues and how best to support them. So specifically, there's a lot of interest in how best to support the Latinx community. There's interest in, seeing that the childcare system is kind of unraveling, and that youth are really struggling to be able to learn online and to have the resources and support that they need to be successful with that. And as well as the support for small businesses and seeing them starting to close, recognizing the interconnectedness of the folks who are working for those small businesses are probably many of the same people who are accessing services from nonprofits right now. So making those connections and wondering how philanthropy can play the best role in keeping small businesses afloat. We're also getting questions about nonprofits, and very much in line with what the topic, is today. Donors are most interested to know how you're filling the gap. So donors get that everybody's being impacted, and this is really hard to be a fundraiser right now. And they're really curious what does the gap look like, both at kind of that landscape level for all nonprofits in Sonoma County, as well as, asking about their favorite nonprofits. But then also really wanting to see, as Beth was talking about, kind of need and hope, seeing what creative ideas nonprofits have come up with to fill the gap, to adapt to programs, to continue to engage and be there for the community that they serve. So for us, it's been a great opportunity to talk with donors about how best to support nonprofits right now, and to say some of the things that we've been saying for many years but are really true, particularly in this moment. For example, the importance of general operating support, that, tried and true best practice that we know, that's really resonating with donors as they see how every nonprofit is facing a different situation and needs to be able to pivot and have those flexible funds to adapt and be resilient during this time. We are talking with donors about, reducing, if they are providing program support, reducing restrictions on the funding, being flexible on deadlines, recognizing that deliverables may need to change because we just don't know, what we say today, everything could change in a month. So donors definitely seem to understand that. And, capacity building support, that's not something that's always super appealing for donors, but certainly in this time where everyone's had to pivot to working remotely and shifting programs to serve people remotely, that has taken on kind of a new meaning for donors of what that means to support capacity building. We've also been emphasizing that all nonprofits are being impacted no matter what you're doing, and this is something we've been saying for several years coming out of the fires, that whether you're addressing food insecurity or caring for animals or providing arts education to youth, you're struggling right now and need support. And so we've continued to emphasize to donors that this is a time when, keep supporting the nonprofits that you love, whether that's the arts or health and human services, whatever it might be. But this is the rainy day, and if you can dig deep and you can provide more, this is the perfect time. And we have largely seen donors respond to that. Many have already gone ahead and done their year-end giving back in the spring and the summer. They've given more, as I said, the giving is up significantly. And they're continuing to ask questions about, as the situation evolves, as we see different impacts, now what's the best way to support the community? So as Kristin was saying, having that kind of overview of how we work with donors could be helpful to you, and thinking about how you can engage with us, which Kristin will be talking more about. As far as the future and what giving would look like, we are as curious as you are. We've seen that we have had a couple of donors who had been planning to make very large gifts to their donor advised funds have proceeded with that. But most gifts to donor advised funds come in at year end. And so we have yet to see how giving will really be impacted. Even with the stock market bouncing back, it's there's just still so much uncertainty that we anticipate some impacts for our donors as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kristin to talk a little bit more about successful engagement with donors in this time.
Thanks, Elly. I appreciate that. As you all saw earlier, I hope during the start of our pandemic, many donors stepped up into this time and really supported organizations. We also recognize that a lot of those early funds that were donated have in effect been spent, because the reality is that organizations have greater expenses during that time as a result of providing services in a double disaster time period. And as Elly mentioned, we're really just uncertain about what year-end giving is going to look like with our donors. But with all of that, we can share some observations about some of the fundraising strategies and tactics that we've seen, and engagement tactics that we've seen that have worked really well. So we just wanted to share those with you so you can take some notes and put them in your back pocket and make sure you're doing some of that work. We've seen that nonprofits have had really quite profound success with our mutual donors, so your donors and our donors, and occasionally as an opportunity to introduce your work with new donors when you create a case for your work and you're sharing that with us. So these are really concise, one page, like don't go too crazy, cases that describe the need or the problem and your very specific solution. The most successful cases that we've seen are really those that are very clearly articulate exactly how you're being impacted by COVID or the fires or a combination of that, and how you're adapting to meeting those challenges. So Elly talked about some of the innovations that you might be doing, and if you've implemented those changes to your programs and to your operations, this is a great way to share that. Our donors really want to see not just how you have been impacted, but the changes and the pivots that you've made to make sure that you can address the changing needs in our community. And to be honest, this also just gives us a really nice starting place to have these deeper conversations with donors to help be an advocate on your behalf, so that as staff of the Community Foundation, we really know and understand what's happening on the ground for you, and we can share that. But it's also an opportunity for us to have those conversations start between you and a donor. And just because, and I'm going to emphasize something that Elly said earlier, just because you're asking and talking about things in a case that's might be very specific, it doesn't mean you shouldn't ask for general operating support. I feel like we're in this moment together where we can be a champion for that, you can be a champion for that, but we all need to have a similar message to make sure that donors understand how critical those flexible dollars are for you in order to meet the community needs that are changing during this really uncertain time period. Okay, so back to those cases. I also wanted to say that these are not just a written case, right? There's something bigger that happens when you present information like this to the Community Foundation. It's really an opportunity to keep us regularly informed on your work at a much deeper level. And then it allows us as those folks who are really having these deep conversations with donors to see the connections between your clients or your land or the policy or the advocacy work that you're doing. And it allows us to be stronger champions for your work and to find ways that may leverage donors' generosity and philanthropy. So another really successful tactic that we have seen is when nonprofits have really strong donor engagement. To be honest, the Community Foundation, we're our staff as advisors, we're really just gatekeepers for donors who choose to be anonymous or have asked us to serve as intermediaries for whatever reason. So we encourage you to continue to steward your donors in really meaningful ways that is relevant to your specific organization. And we're all different. So what might be right for you might not be right for the person, if you could see the screen bubble, who's down next to you. So in this time, it could be Zoom updates. It could be socially distanced hikes in a preserve. It could be check-in phone calls, special thank you notes. There may be volunteer opportunities that are safe for your donors. It could be personal emails and updates, or whatever it is that makes sense considering your organization's mission and capacity. Just keep them updated and engaged. And at this moment, there's something else that I think is really important for us to acknowledge, especially here in Sonoma County. Nonprofits have been heavily reliant on fundraising events historically. Well, today we all know that most of those events have either been canceled completely or they've pivoted to online events. The most successful online events that we see now are those that are still stewarding their donors in advance of those events. And they have lead gifts that really inspire other donors to come to the table, again, in advance of the online events. So these ask and these gifts that may be coming in could be peer-to-peer, so a way, again, a volunteer opportunity that perhaps one of your high-end donors could do to ask another donor to join them. It could be a direct ask from an executive director or a development director in your organization. But we see that the organizations that come to the table on their events with half of their money or whatever the ratio is that's right for your organization, but they've raised already a significant amount of money before they start that next Zoom meeting, their online event, they're more successful. Okay, so around events, I wanted to just say there's one more piece that we've heard kind of, donors talk a little bit about. I would say please don't hesitate to have very open communication conversations with your donors about what are the other organizations that they might be supporting during this time. And with that, be very mindful of when nonprofit online events might conflict, especially if there's overlap with your donors and you know that they support an environmental organization and a food security organization. So making sure that they're able to support both is really important. We're not in competition, we all work together, and we never want to make a donor feel like they have to choose between two organizations or causes that they care deeply about. Everything that I've just talked about, it really boils down to maintaining and bolstering personal communication and connections with donors and those who are working directly with donors. If you haven't read that article that was shared as a pre-read on the Chronicle of Philanthropy about donor communication during this time, I strongly recommend it. It's really a helpful tool just to remind us to make sure that we're in touch and that we're engaging our donors openly. Okay, so with that, I wanted to share one little note. I talked about these cases and the kind of the one-pagers that we love to get from organizations. I wanted to share something that at the Community Foundation, a lot of us have done the work. We've worked directly in direct services and nonprofits, and we know that it's not easy to get all the materials together always. So we hope that when you update us, that you will use existing materials that you already have in place. Please don't feel like you need to create a special report or have a graphic designer make anything special for us. That's not what we want. We'd rather have you focus on your mission and the work that you're doing on the ground and to send us existing things that you already have. So that's the first thing. The second thing is for you all to know that if you update Elly with something, then she's going to share it across the board with all of our teams. So our philanthropic planning team, we share everything, but it's more than just that. We also share with the community impact team, and they also in turn share directly with us. So we make sure that we're as informed as possible and we can all hold you and all be advocates for your work. So that sharing is really important for us. All right, so now that I'm talking about sharing, I'm going to share one of my amazing colleagues with you as Elly and I transition off, and now you get to be held by the great skills of Karin Demarest.
And here I am. Thank you, Kristin. Thank you, Elly. I hope that everyone really appreciated and learned from my wonderful colleagues. Oftentimes during our quarterly coffees, we have a lot of questions coming in for the philanthropic planning team. So I'm just so grateful that you got to have firsthand experience of how great they are, smart, and what a great resource they can be for you as you think about your donors. And I'm very excited that we have more resources for you at this part of the webinar. We are going to bring on 3 really fantastic nonprofit leaders who have taken their organizations and done the pivot that we've all been talking about in terms of fundraising. So I'm going to invite them into the panel. We have Veronica Vences, who's the Associate Executive Director of La Luz. We have Leslie Simmons, who is the Development and Marketing Manager of the Career Technical Education Foundation. And then finally, we have Caroline Silverstein, who is the Chief Development Officer of 10,000 Degrees. And so all 3 of these organizations have found creative and innovative ways of bringing their fundraising activities into the current moment. So each one of them are going to take about 5 to 7 minutes to share with you about their successes and their challenges, maybe a few tips for you that you can use as you think about doing fundraising in this new reality. So we're going to start with Veronica. She's going to share with you for 5 or so minutes. But I really do encourage you as they're talking, and I see we have a question already from Danielle, so thank you so much for that. We'll be answering all of the questions that you put into the Q&A at the last part of the webinar. And again, if you like one question, if you can click the thumbs up next to that question, we will prioritize those. We're hoping to get a lot of questions. This is where we can really customize this presentation to meet your needs. So Veronica, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and then we'll come to Leslie, and then we'll finish up with Caroline.
Perfect. Thank you, Karin. So before we get started, I do want to extend a thank you to the Community Foundation for having this topic, which I think is very needed for all of our nonprofits. And so I get the privilege of sharing what has been working at La Luz. But before I jump into that, hopefully everybody is familiar with La Luz, but we're located out in Sonoma Valley. We've been an organization for 35 years, and our current mission is to strengthen our community through family services, economic advancement, and community engagement. Kind of like the slogan that puts all of that together for us is that we're taking our families and our community from asking for a fish, but actually teaching them how to fish. So that's been our underlining kind of theory of change for us. And the hope is that if somebody comes in a time of need, that we can inspire them and support them to learn skills that can then make them active and engaged citizens in Sonoma Valley and throughout the county. So I've been with the organization for 6 years. It's incredible to believe how long I've been there, but my start with the organization was actually in programs. And through the years, I am actually now leading the development. And that's, I think, one of the things that I do want to emphasize is that in this time of need, that connection and that integration of our programs has been critical, right? The live attention to how many families are being served with COVID positive testing, how many families have come in today to receive services is critical to then letting our supporters and our community know, our donors, what is happening real time. Because as we all know, everything has changed basically from one day to the next. So at the beginning of the year, another thing that I'll share is I took on this role not knowing that COVID was around the corner, right? And it's been a very interesting year for me to really take upon the lead in fundraising. But what that meant for me too was that there was almost like an equal playing field for everybody. Like everything that we knew about development and fundraising, yes, it's good knowledge, but it kind of was, the rug was pulled out from under our feet. And so now we had to figure out what makes sense in our current reality. How are we engaging our donors? How do we amplify our work? And so one of the first conversations that I had internally was around our fundraiser, our gala. It typically takes place in August, and by, I would say, May, we knew that wasn't going to happen. So we took a leap of faith and said, let's do it virtual. At that time, and I'm talking about May, June, there wasn't too many virtual fundraisers. We didn't really know what the landscape would look like. But we went ahead and did it, and honestly, it paid off. As Kristin mentioned, a lot of the reason why it was so successful was because we had had some committed sponsorships leading into the program, and so that basically created a buzz, and it allowed our other donors to say, okay, I want to be part of that success. Another thing that made our gala very successful was launching a donor stewardship program that was board led. And that was pretty much in sync with our gala. So what ended up happening was our donors were getting real live information and clarification really about what is this gala going to be around. Is this different than the crisis fund that we had opened in March? So in some ways we were already doing double asks. And so it allowed our board members to be the voice of clarification to our donors. And that was critical because they then understood that the funds that we had raised for crisis, it were money that went directly into the community versus now our gala, which was operating funds. And I think that just having that conversation was very valuable. We then went ahead and had a second event. And in that second event, it wasn't so much as a large fundraiser, it was more of a fundraiser. And this is, I think, where during these crises, you see opportunities. So with Facebook, with Zoom, we knew that we could engage a wider audience. We knew that we could also engage probably tasting. And that really was successful for us because out of the 80 or so attendees, about 60% of those were new to the organization. And so it was fun. It was not a big ask. It was just come learn about our organization. And now what we're doing as a third piece to this is that we're going to be having Zoom calls, one for our new donors and one for our existing donors. And so, you know, I go back to it's been a great learning opportunity, but it's also reminded us that we need to continue to keep the communication, open communication with our donors. I know I'm out of time, but I do have some tips. And just very briefly, you can connect with me about these virtual events, but one of them is considering how engaged you want your audience to be, because that will determine the best platform to use, whether it's Zoom or a YouTube channel. Also, outsourcing the production is something that we found ideal for us, because our team is so small and we couldn't manage everything that we had to. The first time we went with a San Francisco based organization, and the second time we did a very local media organization. And then the last thing I would say is also keep it fun, right? And so we were able to do little mezcal tastings for our first fundraiser, and then the second one, it was all about the mezcal. So keeping it fun, lively, all of that has worked for us in this time that really it's full of uncertainty.
Thank you, Veronica. That's great. And I know I have a couple of questions. But we're going to move on to the next person. But I do encourage everybody, there's some, great opportunities at the end to ask questions. So let's go ahead and move on to Leslie now.
Great. Thank you, Karin. Thanks, Veronica. That was really great. So yeah, I'm from CTE Foundation, Career Technical Education Foundation. And our mission is to innovate the education to career experience to strengthen economic development and student success. And we do that primarily by investing in high school courses and programs that really introduce kids to career pathways that are in Sonoma County that are keeping our economy going, and really help them develop the hard and soft skills to better prepare them for life after high school. So I'm here to talk a little bit about some of our Facebook fundraising that we've done this past summer. One thing, we had a campaign that basically ran from June to July, and it was a full fundraising campaign, and the outreach tools we used were our MailChimp list and Facebook. And June is not really traditionally a time for fundraising, I think, for most organizations, but with COVID, the rules are out the window, right? So we sort of took advantage of this opportunity. The timing just kind of worked out right for us. First of all, we needed the funds, so that was obviously a big driver. Also, at that time in June, the economy was opening up a little bit, so restrictions were loosening. People were feeling a little bit more confident, but there was still a lot of uncertainty, especially around what school would look like in the fall, and distance learning and education. And so I think there was just kind of this lucky balance that we found in this time period, where normally June and July people would be heading out for vacation, and they had something else on their minds at this time. So couple important things that we did before the launch of our campaign. The first one is stewardship. So the first 2 weeks of June, we distributed lists, contact lists to our board of everybody who donated in 2019, and made phone calls and said thank you to every single person. And I think that it wasn't anything elaborate. You could leave a message, but it was really, we heard some nice feedback, and that was really important, I think, to setting us up for success for the rest of the year. And the other thing that I did was created content. So I knew we were going to be doing a big Facebook push and sending out lots of email messages. And so I did some homework. I did some work ahead of time, collected testimonials from teachers who we had recently given grants to support distance learning. I pulled out photos that we had taken throughout the year, tried to craft some messages ahead of time so that I would have a calendar ready to go. And then the other really important thing is we had a champion board member. He's actually on the call here today, but I didn't ask if I could use his name. So I'm just going to call him our champion board member. And he's worth the weight of probably 4 to 5 normal board members. So he is a really good fundraiser. But he's kind of our magic ticket. And so I would suggest that you can apply this relationship that I have with this board member to several board members. So he was sort of our big peer-to-peer pusher. We launched our fundraising campaign on June 17th. we honestly didn't really have a specific end date in mind. And we didn't immediately come out publicly with how much we wanted to raise. So we didn't really have our goal set for a few days. We didn't really want to push it out there because we were nervous. The climate was uncomfortable, weird. We didn't know what to expect. We did know, however, that we had a funder who was going to step in and do a challenge match. So we had a John Jordan Foundation stepped up and said, we'll put $50,000 down as a challenge match. And so we knew we were going to be able to leverage that and inspire people. So that was sort of a big game that we played, of course. And some of the key communications that we had. So we kind of had three parallel campaigns with three different goals. So CTE Foundation has our Facebook page, and we launched a fundraising campaign, and our goal was $5,000. Our board champion had his own personal fundraising page, and his goal was $10,000. So his goal was twice as big as my goal. And then we had our general, reaching out through MailChimp, which is our mail source that we use. And we don't have a huge audience, honestly. Our stakeholder group is about 1,000. It's grown a little bit over the summer, or actually quite a bit, but it's not huge. But it's people who are really dedicated to our work, so that's helpful. One of the challenges that development folks, you guys know, I know have, and there's a distaste for using Facebook to fundraise. And that's because you don't get contact information. So if you have a fundraiser, somebody makes a donation, you typically don't get their contact information unless you already know them. And the advantage of using board members to help push out your fundraiser and to do their own fundraising campaigns is that they have personal relationships, hopefully, with everybody who sees their fundraiser. And so in this case, especially with our champion board member, every few days after he'd get a set of donations, he would send us an email saying so-and-so, 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 name, phone number, email. And that was very effective. And then we can use that information going forward to cultivate them, steward them, send them another thank you. And that's the magic potion, right? Is to have that person that has a personal relationship. Because on my CTE Foundation fundraiser page, I don't necessarily know everybody who's a fan of our page. If they make a $10 donation, I don't know them, it's not worth that much. Or even if they make a $1,000 donation, I don't have that opportunity to continue a relationship with them beyond that one donation. But with your board members, they can cultivate that relationship with that person on Facebook. One of the things we did was every single donor got a thank you pretty immediately. So because donations are public on people's pages, I was able to see all of the donors that were on his page making donations. He would say thank you, I'd go in, I'd say thank you. And this kept the algorithm so it was showing up at the top of people's searches and their pages. And so that kind of helped us create this cyclone of information, and people kept seeing, oh, so-and-so donated, friends of friends and friends of friends could see that. And so I think that was really helpful. Let's see, any other notes here? After the campaign, we raised $139,140 total from 138 donors, and about 10,000 of that was through Facebook. So a lot of other stuff was happening behind the scenes at the same time, but we felt really happy with the donations that we brought in that way. And every single donor that we had contact information did receive another thank you call from our board of directors. And many of the checks that came in and donations that were made definitely were inspired by the John Jordan Foundation match. So that was a really key part of inspiring people to get engaged and to support us. A couple quick recommendations. Keep your campaigns short. We ended up doing this for about a month, and honestly, it's too long. I would suggest 7 to 10 days is a sweet spot for a Facebook fundraiser. Going beyond that, there's just too much content that you have to create, and it just gets exhausting. And then really have your content ready in advance. I had gotten some video testimonials from teachers, and like I said, put together photos. Try to put together as much of that as you can, and it'll make for a smoother transition. You're not able to schedule posts in Facebook fundraisers like you would with a normal Facebook page, and so you have to be actively doing it every single day. So it can get exhausting, so keep it short. And I think that's it for now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Leslie. And what I appreciate is that we have two different examples of different ways to approach this. So let's go ahead and hand it over to Caroline. And again, any questions, just plop them in the Q&A. Take it away, Caroline.
Thank you, Karin. I'm Caroline Silverstein with 10,000 Degrees, and it was just really interesting to listen to Leslie and to Veronica, and a lot of shared experiences. 10,000 Degrees just is a organization that supports students from low-income backgrounds to and through college. We are in 7 Bay Area counties, including Sonoma County, and we provide college and financial aid counseling, near-peer coaching, scholarships, financial aid management to our students. I was going to speak a little bit about our One Amazing Night fundraiser that has been sort of the backbone of our fundraising efforts in the last part of our fiscal year. It was scheduled to be April 21st, and so we had to pivot quickly. We had 6 weeks when we had to cancel the event at the beginning of the pandemic. And so we had to kind of just really like think about, okay, who usually supports this event? And it was really the event that our board and our honorary board, our advisory boards, our major donors would support by sponsoring, by showing up, but also by bringing their networks. If they wanted to introduce somebody to 10,000 Degrees, they were often doing it through bringing them to One Amazing Night. And so it really made sense, and this supports what I think Leslie and Veronica were saying. It really made a lot of sense for us to build out a peer-to-peer campaign, because what it did is it kind of made our board of directors, you know, like a little fundraising army to support us at an incredibly stressful time when we were all just kind of reeling. And so we put the time into sitting down with our board of directors and creating individual fundraising pages, customizing. We really tried to respond and have continued to in our messaging is you can't ignore what's going on in the world right now. I mean, there are so many crises that are hitting all at once. And so I think in your messaging, you really need to explain to your donors how you're continuing to do your work in this time. And so for us, it is, how do we continue to support our students when you've got, you know, the pandemic, the movement against racial injustice, you know, now the fires, like how are we still showing up for our students? How have our program teams pivoted? And so just making sure that your messaging does not try to ignore what's going on, but shows how you continue to have impact and respond. So we did, you know, we definitely in our messaging played to that. So once we had set up the peer-to-peer fundraising, that was really, we pivoted from One Amazing Night to One Amazing Community. The peer-to-peer fundraising was really the fundraising part of it, but what One Amazing Night also was a celebration of our students and our community and our supporters, and we didn't want to lose that part. So we did go ahead, we did not have a lot of time to do it, but we did go ahead and put together an event, a virtual event, and we learned some things from that one where we only had a couple of weeks to put it together that we're now using for something where we've had a longer time. I would say you've got to just play to your strengths. We all know there's a lot of negatives about not being able to have these face-to-face interactions with donors, but on the flip side, there are some strengths. So with virtual events, you don't have to worry about whether or not you get a sponsor the day before. So you just keep on going after sponsorships and, you know, trying to continue to get viewership all the way up and to the event, and know that people sign up really last minute. So it's really scary that you're putting all this work into like putting together an event and your sign up numbers are low. But I just think that kind of tends to be what happens. The virtual program is going to be all about your impact. But what's nice is in a live program, you may only get to have a couple of people come up on stage to help you with your messaging. In a virtual program, the way that you can kind of stream it together, you can hear from so many more people. So at our One Amazing Night Gala, I would often get the feedback, That was wonderful, but I wish we had gotten to hear an opportunity from more than, 2 students. Well, in a virtual program, you can hear from a lot more students because you can do short testimonials that then you kind of string together with maybe one person that is live. So pre-record as much as you can. You just need to have one person that's live, that's kind of the spokesperson that can kind of be flowing those segments together. The other thing is that, what we've been finding is there is starting to be a bit of virtual, Zoom fatigue, and it can be distressing to see that you had, a lot of people signed up and then the night of only half of them showed up. But that's why you've got this recording. So continue to use it, put the time in, when it's said and done to maybe, you've got the whole recording, but also to edit out little segments of sort of the best parts of that recording and continue to use that as follow-up tools afterwards. And so that is something that we've been able to do. And then I guess I would also just second the AV. I think when we did something in April, people were much more forgiving. I mean, we did not know. I mean, it was early days, so we did it ourselves. I'm forgetting to unmute the transitions. I mean, we were working our best, but I think now people are expecting, if you're doing a virtual event, people are expecting it to be more polished. So if this is a fundraising event that is would have been like a gala, I would invest in the AV and have that professional sort of support. It'll take the blood pressure way down. So that's what I've got.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to ask a couple questions before we hand it back over to Kris, who will facilitate a Q&A that includes Elly and Kristin as well. But for the 3 of you, one of the major themes I heard was board engagement. From the supersonic board member that CTE Foundation has, to the peer-to-peer learning and the donor, the board engagement, the board stewardship program. So what for those organizations who might say, you know what, my board, they come to a meeting every month and they're really committed, they really care, but we just can't get them to take that step to do the development work. Might you have some tips if that is the case for some of the organizations? And any of you can answer. Veronica, please. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was new in some ways for most of our board, and we have a pretty large board, about 18 individuals. So we actually right away said, this goes across for everybody. And what we equipped them with was a script, up-to-date information, all of the contact information of the donor, and we left it as you're just giving them information. You're not doing an ask, you're just relaying what we're doing. And a success story was in doing this, we have a donor who typically comes in at about $2,500 at the end of the year as annual appeal. And she decided that because now she understood what LaLuz was doing in the critical time, she went ahead and did a monthly $500 donation. And so that to us, right, is what it's all about. It's that constant communication. So I would say lessen this expectation of a great ask. It's all about information. And once the dialogue begins to happen, it can actually lead to a donation.
And Veronica, do you give your board members talking points, or how do you equip them to share that information?
Yes, and that's exactly what we do. So it's almost like they got a packet of information, and very kind of school-like. But yes, it was a packet with talking points. It was including what we're doing for COVID, where we're at as an organization, and what this fundraiser means to us in terms of our overall budget, as well as a note-taking sheet that thankfully most of them completed, so that they could take notes on what these donors were saying they were passionate about, where they wanted more information on. So it was about 3 to 4 documents that they received. And it was a constant reminder. It was almost a weekly reminder that we had to say, hey, this is the deadline. It was then extended and it was then extended. But throughout the whole process, it panned out for us in getting people to attend. And again, those donations that came through.
Great, thank you. Leslie or Caroline?
You know, I don't have anything much to add. I think Veronica had some great points. The only other thing I would suggest is if you have other sort of subcommittees that maybe people are on them that are not board members. So we have, for example, a fund development committee, we have a grant committee. So there's other champions out there that you might be able to tap into that are not necessarily on your board. And I would say use them.
Great, thank you. Caroline?
And I would say too, I mean, I think that sometimes it's, there's a little bit of a fear of maybe they've already asked on your behalf already this year or recently. And, you know, another thing to do is just explain that, like, especially when you're putting together these virtual events, is that we just have less opportunities to get in front of our donors right now, so that they can kind of see even attending a virtual event as a stewardship opportunity. And just explaining that, you know, you can ask the board member, you know, to thank them for their prior support, and we really want to keep you connected and updated on what we're doing, so please tune in. And it kind of takes away that like fear of the ask, and then you can do the follow-up if you get them to attend and follow up and make that ask. But at least you're putting sort of the onus on them and the personal relationship they have to at least get them to tune in.
Great, fantastic. I guess I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Kris. And folks, again, the Q&A is open to you. And I guess, shall we go ahead and bring back Elly and Kristin as well? And we can offer a question, Q&A
Sure.
to anyone. Thanks so much, Kris.
Thank you, Karin. Before we move forward, if I was able to see hands and get everyone to respond, we could kind of have a contest. But since we can't, in your own mind, do you know how many nonprofits there are in Sonoma County? And it relates to the first question. And that number, according to GuideStar, is 2,900 nonprofits, all of whom have similar goals that you do by the end of the year. And so the first question that came in from Regina is absolutely cogent and to message. And I don't have the answer, but opening it up to our panelists who want to just take a stab. And that is, with the plethora of nonprofits in our county, how real is fundraising fatigue, and how might you address this issue with your constituents and donors if you have some way to do that? And anyone can raise their hand and I'll try to call on you, or if there's no real answer. Yeah, Leslie?
You know, I don't know what the real answer is, and I am actually new to fundraising, honestly. So the development thing in my title is, you know, take it with a grain of salt, right? But, you know, what I always hear is it's like, if people are in line with your mission, you know, they will make the gift. And so you just have to ask, and you know, if they say no now, it doesn't mean no forever. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know if there's a limit here in Sonoma County. So far, we're good. So I think that's the fortunate thing.
We used to say the best answer is, you know, you ask somebody if they want to give, is really, you know, just asking. And if they say no, that's a great answer, because then you know. But as you said, half the effort is just making the ask. So maybe not much simpler than that. Thank you for that. There was also a question about, just really quickly, Veronica, what local company, you may have seen that question, did you use to outsource the production of the fundraisers?
Yes, so thank you for that. The first one was actually a San Francisco based, and they're Greg Angelo's production company. I believe it's Greg Angelo's Velocity. And then the second one, the local one, was Nexo Media. And they actually have been doing a lot of publicity around COVID. They do bilingual media production. They actually have a production site here locally. And so that's where it took place. And you can, the best way to connect with them is Facebook, Nexo, Nexo Media. And most likely you'll speak to Hector Velasquez, who's their CEO.
Okay, great. Anybody else have local companies that people may want to be aware of before we move on? Okay, quick question from Margot that just showed up. How long did Leslie suggest a Facebook campaign should last? Is there a magic number, Leslie, that you've seen works better than another duration?
Well, like I said in my presentation, I would not suggest 30 days. It got really long and tiring. I would suggest something like 7 to 10 days, especially if you have a real finite thing that you're raising money for. I think it really helps to sort of really push that and make that urgent. We have 10 days, you know, so that would be my suggestion. It's a reasonable amount of time and it doesn't exhaust you as much.
Sure. Good. I think we had a few other questions that that came in, and this could again be open to anybody, but maybe Kristin, Elly, more to the two of you. One of the common questions we get, which may be a little more crass and to the point, but I think it's in many people's mind, is how do people get to our donors, to the donors who support the Community Foundation? And I think you talked about that a little bit, but maybe Kristin, Elly, kind of address that a little bit more. I guess more about the partnership, but that is kind of the overall question.
So I think that the big thing is we don't really serve as a gatekeeper, but our job is to really help to bolster donors' philanthropy and really kind of rooting that in values and in goals and in their interests so that they can really align their giving with what's most important to them, as opposed to sort of that responsive ask that we, as development folks in the past, like we've all done that. We've all been like, thank goodness that we got, you know, I made an ask and I got it, and someone's like, I'll cut you a check, or my friend gave to my favorite cause, so now I'm going to give to their favorite cause. The best way that we're able to really move the needle and make larger, impactful gifts for our donors and make those recommendations is when we have that alignment with their values. So in terms of you getting to that, I think it's really a matter of ensuring that there's alignment. So that's keeping those lines of communication open to Elly and I and to the community impact team, like really keeping us informed is one of the best ways that you can, you know, get to our donors, because we're going to be able to be your voice and your champion with those donors when we know your work. The better we know it, the more articulate we can be, and we can speak to those things.
Good. Anybody else, Elly, or anybody else want to comment on that?
Well, I would definitely echo what Kristin said, and I think if you're new to working with donor advised funds, if you do receive a grant from a donor advised fund, I'd recommend following up with the foundation to figure out who the staff contact is for that fund, so that you can send a personal thank you note that we can, send to the donors on your behalf. And if they, and then keep us, as Kristin said, keep us informed. And not just coming back a year later to ask if they're interested in renewing their grant, but providing us with an update on what you've done and the impact you've had. We really want to be spokespeople for you. We want to be able to present you in the best light that we can and highlight the incredible work that you do. So, equipping us with that information and messaging is really critical for that.
Good. There's another question that was asked, and maybe this is to the panelists. Case in point, I think we had 120 people that RSVP'd today, which was great, or 115, and we still had close to 80. But that gap there and kind of the attendance, and I guess just kind of generally for the three of you and what you've seen, do you have any ways that you get people to show up to your virtual events, and what have you seen works? What's a good incentive or some tricks that other folks on the call might be able to utilize in their online opportunities?
Take that one. So on the virtual events, we've done some sort of smaller virtual events with donor salons where we've invited, we might have in Sonoma County, we had them with a regional focus. So hearing about, for example, our programming in Healdsburg, and then we would invite our donors from Healdsburg. It was very 2020 that even our virtual donor salon had to be canceled and rescheduled because of fires. I feel like that's this year. Everything gets canceled and rescheduled. So I think for those smaller ones, you know, we have been only seeing about half of them, and then it's just following up afterwards with the recording and just using it as a stewardship move. I would say for if you're trying to put together like a virtual sort of gala, what we have done for both of ours is we dropped off for like One Amazing Community. We looked at who had made our largest Fund in Need gifts the year prior. And then the day before the event, we dropped off a little, a bottle of wine and a little appetizer, you know, cheese and crackers, and a little note with the Zoom link, and just went around and dropped those off at key donors. And it definitely helped. It got people to tune in. And, you know, once they tune in, if you're messaging, you know, that it was kind of the hook that kind of helped us get there. So that's something that you may want to invest in, is just doing that for your sponsors or special VIP donors.
So nothing wrong with a little guilt is what you're saying.
Totally effective development strategy.
Absolutely. Veronica, I'm sorry, go ahead. What did you want to add?
Back off of that. So for what we did is we did a different tactic, right? We said the first 100 people to sign up get this kit. That did include some alcoholic beverages, and we mentioned it throughout the event. And so that really was an incentive for people to tune in. Yeah, I mean, anything, like I mentioned, anything to make it fun. At the end, what we heard was that it felt like a community, right? It was something that was shared amongst the participants. So you only see these little windows in your computer, but if you all have something that you're sharing in common, like physically drinking or enjoying a meal, then you feel like you're in the same room together. So that worked very well for us as well.
Okay, good. We have guilt and wine. Anything else, Leslie? Or okay, Karin has a couple questions she wants to that she's heard from some folks. So Karin, go ahead.
Well, Veronica, I mean, to build on what you were just saying, you did mention that 60% of those that attended your fundraiser were new. How did you find those new folks? And it sounds like you inspired them to join with the things you just talked about, but how did you first identify them?
Yes, so what we did is, one, we used Facebook. I think that, like Leslie mentioned, there's a lot of learned lessons as you do that. But now we weren't limited to people that lived in a certain region. And then the other thing that we did is I honestly sent out a blast email to all of our contacts as well as our foundation contacts. And what we found was there was 3 different companies, organizations, I would say. 2 of them were private companies that said, you know what, our employees have been deployed since March and we haven't had a happy hour together. So one of them, I believe, registered about 14 people, and then the other company registered 10 people because they wanted their own team to have a common moment together. And then the other opportunity that panned out for us was sending it to a foundation that we've had a strong relationship with out in the Bay Area. And the program officer there has been a champion for us, and she sent it out to her network. And so then we had like 5 different foundation representatives. So we didn't limit it to only our donors, right? We said, heck, everybody can come, everybody can join. So actually what showed up were foundation representatives. It was private businesses that wanted to support us. So again, there's an opportunity to think about it differently because you're not constrained by geography. In terms of getting it to them, because there were some people that lived in the Bay Area, when they registered, they actually selected a mail option, and then they would, like getting it mailed and delivered, they would take on the additional cost on their end. So it wasn't something that the organization took on as an additional cost.
Great, very creative. I see a couple questions here around fundraising goals. So Caroline, with your event fundraising goal through the spring 2020 virtual event, or what portion of your original goal did you raise, and have you increased or lower your event fundraising goals for the next fundraiser in light of what you've learned and the experience you've had?
Yeah, so I'm a definite believer in being sort of upfront with your goal. I mean, it may not be the true goal. It may be like, you know, there might be a little bit of a political on what the goal is, but we did, in our case, we had raised, you know, money in sponsorships before the event was ever canceled. So we had $300,000 that we had raised in sponsorships prior to the start of the pandemic. And so in that case, it was calling all of those, you know, generous sponsors and asking them if they would kind of convert their sponsorship to a gift because the event wasn't going to happen. And then we did put, you know, a large, you know, goal up on our peer-to-peer fundraising campaign of $500,000, which we met. And, you know, in that case, it was sort of like, again, we kind of needed to. I mean, this was for us to be able to continue to support our students with this scholarship assistance and continue, you know, to staff with our college success staff. And we needed to kind of make this number. So it was a true goal, and just making sure that you're kind of communicating that out to all of your supporters. And then we had our progress bar shown. So, you know, we didn't show it right away though. That's what I would say is people want to, there's like a psychology of that, is that they want to contribute to something that they already see that there's some success. The other thing that you can do, depending on what your platform is if you're getting checks in the mail, you can add them as offline donations, which we did. So if we got some people were giving obviously through online, but we were getting gifts in from DAFs or through checks, and we would add them as offline donations so that they would appear. And so visually on the campaign, you're seeing everybody that's contributing, and then it's more likely to kind of take on a life of its own.
Great, fantastic. Kris, why don't I hand it back to you to wrap us up.
Wrap up. Well, there are just a few quick questions. One more, I think, that came in that can be really quick on La Luz and 10,000 Degrees regarding a live and silent auction. Did we answer those? What you guys utilized at each of your events? Did you have auction that was good, or did you do kind of a silent ongoing auction that people could weigh in on over a period of time?
So we ended up not going forward with our auction. Our auction items tend to be in mostly in travel or restaurants, entertainments, and just where we were in the pandemic, it was kind of a no-go for us. So right. I can't speak to that yet.
Makes sense. Veronica?
Yeah, same here. We've actually taken out auctions from our program probably for the last 5 years because of how it kind of takes a dip in the momentum, and especially with virtual, I don't know how that would work. But the fund a need is also interesting to consider because you have to plan around that, and it's the same thing. How do you keep the audience engaged, and how do you make sure that as people that they feel connected to the gift that they're doing? So there's a little bit more planning that has to do with a live fund a need.
I have to jump in here because I'm going to give myself, our company, our organization, a little pitch, because we have a fundraiser in 1 week from today. So anybody that is interested, you guys should check out our fundraiser because it might be an opportunity for you to sort of see how it works. I have a lot of fear and excitement for it, but we are doing both. We're doing a virtual auction, so it'll open up in the middle of our fundraiser and it'll extend out for a few days. And we are doing a fund a need during the event. And we are not doing a Zoom event. So it's an event that's going to go out, broadcast live on YouTube and Facebook, but it's not going to be a Zoom. So you're not going to see all the people that are there. So check it out.
Good. I think we're going to move towards closing here with just kind of one wrap up. And I also wanted to get Beth back on if, towards the end here. And I think what I'd like to ask each of the panelists in a very top of mind question. I know we're about 10 minutes to go, but really going back to Beth's original question, and maybe each of you can comment on, what do you have for kind of hope right now as we move towards the end of the year? What gives you hope? I think Beth mentioned that, and it'd be great to get all of our participants to be involved in that as well. But maybe we can just go through that with each of the 5 of you for 30 seconds or whatever you need, and then I'd love for Beth to come back on and close us out. So with that, who wants to go first with, despite everything around us, despite literally smoke in the air and masks on our faces and just all that we're going through with our kids and education and challenges at our offices and with our fundraising, what are you hopeful about as we look to the end of this year and beyond? Who'd like to go first? Okay, Kristin.
I'll do it. So I'm a parent. I have an almost 11-year-old, and the thing that gives me hope is watching this generation of kids as these moments can be heartbreaking and difficult and challenging for them, but watching their resilience and their motivation to take what they've learned during this time forward to the future. And I feel like there's power and potential of solving climate change and remedying, inequity because of this generation of kids. And I'm really hopeful and really proud of them.
Oh, very nice. Leslie?
Yeah, and I'll reiterate exactly what Kristin said, because I've been doing interviews with teachers the last week or so in preparation for our fundraiser to do some videos. And it's really amazing, despite the challenges that teachers are facing, especially our CTE teachers that teach hands-on learning, right? They're making it work, and they're so creative and so passionate and seeing a silver lining that, yes, okay, this is really bad and challenging, but these are skills, students are learning these skills on Zoom, right, that they may never have had the opportunity to learn. These are going to be skills that they're going to take into the future, and exactly that. I mean, that's the only thing we can take from it. I mean, it's a positive thing. So that's the hope I have.
That's great. A silver lining to a lot of those challenges as we figure them out together moving forward. Anybody else? Caroline, Veronica, or Elly? Go ahead, Veronica.
I'll jump in. What gives me hope right now is that it's probably one of the first times that I see issues being addressed for their face worth or their face value. And I think that different nonprofits are not looking like, what is in it for me, or what, is it within my lane? It's how can we step in to all help? And that is really the only way that we're going to solve these big issues, when we forget about who are we representing, but what is the real issue that is there, and how can we solve it, right? We're seeing that with COVID right now. There's some extraordinary collaborations with the Community Foundation and the county and nonprofits. And to me, that's, wow, we should have been doing this a long time ago, but you know what? We're stepping up and doing it now with the fires also. So to me, that the problems will persist and they may get bigger, fortunately, but if we're all in it to solve the real issue, then we're going to do it, and we're going to do it together.
So feeling fortunate to be in this county where we are, because I know not every place in this country is as collaborative or as helpful to one another as we are. So that's great to be positive about that. Caroline, it looks like you had something to add.
Sure. Well, I think as, fundraising professionals, we care so deeply about the mission that we're fundraising for. And so, I think that honestly, when I just prioritize having time to just reach out and have those phone conversations with donors and being able to give them updates about the work, and I'm always just so touched that their first questions are always just like, how are your students doing? How is the organization doing? You just realize there really are just so many caring individuals. I just think it's a really hard time right now with so much going on to just give yourself, to be able to prioritize and give yourself space for having, making time for all of those conversations. Because the other thing I will say is they're not always, whereas before it might have been a short conversation, everyone is going through so much. And so expect those conversations to be longer. And while they, in a way, uplift you, it's also, you just have to give yourself, just a little emotional and mental space to just have them. But I think that's good.
No, that's great. Keep perspective for sure. Anybody else with our panelists before we go to Beth? Elly? Yes.
I would just say, I mean, it's almost an obvious one, but I'm feeling hopeful by every time I get to talk to somebody working in a nonprofit to hear how organizations under tremendous stress, right, with less staff and fewer volunteers, and we're all, many people are parents and juggling having kids at home and everything that we're dealing with, that there's just this kind of like, okay, but this is coming at us, but here we go, we're figuring out a way. And I've heard just great stories along the way of how mental health organizations are adapting their telehealth services to be able to reach students who are at home and finding creative ways to reach them kind of around their parents, or hosting stewardship days out on preserves and they've got their protocols down of being 6 feet apart, or and there's so many, and I find it really inspiring. It's so hard to, this is a time when we're all kind of in survival mode. So when you hear these, organizations like yours that are innovating, thinking of creative ideas, like that's such a high level of thinking to be doing during this time. And it's impressive and inspiring, and definitely helps keep me going. And I think that's true for a lot of us here at the foundation.
Yeah, that's great. Our Northern California ingenuity is really coming through right now with so many challenges. It's really wonderful to see. So, well, I'm going to pass it back to Beth, who started us off here, and just want to thank all of you for participating today from my perspective, and I look forward to meeting many of you in the coming months, hopefully in person. So, Beth, go ahead.
Well, thanks, Kris, and thanks, everyone. And I think, one thing that gives me hope is our ability to adapt and respond to challenges that we would not have thought possible. I think back to 2017 and the fires, and at the time we would have thought that is the most we can ever bear. And yet here we are, and our ability to innovate and to partner, and our heart's capacity, not just to break. It is a time for being heartbroken over and over, but our hearts are also expanding. And that gives me hope, is that our increased empathy and connection. And that, includes our connection with all of you. Our work and our investments are only as strong as your organization's ability to thrive. So thank you for all that you do, and for making our work and our mission possible. And just to close by saying, to be hopeful and to be a force of growing philanthropy, which we all need to do, you have to also take care of yourselves and do what you need to do to find hope within you, and take those breaks, take care of your families. We're all in the, kind of helping, healing professions, and don't forget that sometimes you're a helper and sometimes you're the one that needs to be helped. And don't hesitate to reach out, including to us, your friends and partners at the Community Foundation. So thanks again so much. We welcome your feedback and reaching out to us. So have a great rest of your day, and we will see you on a Zoom and hopefully one of these days in person again. Thank you.